The kitchen smelled like scorched toast and wet paper. That's how she found it. The note I'd written at 5:37 a.m. in a trembling hand, still curling at the edges from the coffee I'd spilled when I decided I'd finally had enough. It was propped up against the empty wine bottle she'd left on the counter. My handwriting looked like a stranger's. I'm leaving. Good luck with your, whatever he is. The door was already locked behind me when she stumbled into the kitchen in that sequin dress from last night. She had no idea where I was. She had no idea I was already watching her from the idling car across the street. Through the fogged-up windshield, I could see her read it. Her lips moved as she whispered the words. Her face didn't fall the way I'd imagined. She didn't cry. She didn't even sit down. She just smiled, like the note confirmed something she'd been waiting to hear. That smile burned more than the whole night she'd been gone. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The plan was to drive. Just drive. No destination. No explanations. But then my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Unknown number. A single text. She's not who you think she is. I swear my heart stopped. I looked back at the house. She was still in the kitchen, back turned, phone in hand now, typing furiously. My phone buzzed again. Check the bag in the attic before you go. I didn't know who was texting me. I didn't even know how they got my number. But I did know one thing. I couldn't drive away. Not yet. That's how the morning I was supposed to leave became the morning everything else started unraveling. The note wasn't an ending. It was a trigger, and I was about to pull it. I hadn't been up there in over 2 years. The attic ladder groaned like an old man begging me to turn back. Dust curled in the air, catching the soft gray morning light like ash. I told myself it was ridiculous, following some cryptic message from a blocked number. But my gut wouldn't let it go. Something had shifted. Something felt staged. Her expression, that smirk after reading my goodbye note, it was like she wanted me to leave. Like I had finally played into her hands. The attic was colder than I remembered, and smelled faintly of mothballs and damp wood. My flashlight beam landed on the usual mess: seasonal decorations, unopened wedding gifts we never returned, a broken office chair she promised she'd fix. And then, in the far corner, near the insulation we never replaced, I saw it. A black duffel bag. Not ours. It looked new. No dust on it. Like it had been placed there recently, maybe last night. I unzipped it slowly, not sure what I was expecting. Inside were stacks of manila folders. Dozens. All with names. Male names. Some were handwritten, others typed. Each had photos inside. Not just of the men, but of Maribel, with each of them. Some were blurry selfies, others were intimate. None of the men were me. Not one. I sat there on the attic floor as the insulation itched through my jeans, flipping through page after page, watching my marriage die again and again in a series of grainy snapshots. Every photo had a date. Some went back years. One was from just last month, a man in a suit, kissing her on the cheek at what looked like a courthouse. That's when I noticed something else in the bag. A prepaid phone. The kind you buy with cash. I powered it on. No passcode. Only one contact. Locked IN. I clicked the text thread. It was her. Maribel. Dozens of messages. She'd been sending this contact updates. Names, dates, places, even receipts for hotels and ride shares. One message stood out. Clayton's growing suspicious. Might be time. Time for what? I took a picture of the whole bag and its contents, then zipped it back up, my hands shaking. I lowered the ladder and sealed the attic. When I came back down, she was sitting at the kitchen table. Calm. Smiling. Legs crossed. Her coffee steaming like nothing had changed. Forget something? She asked, lifting her cup. And just like that, I knew. She had seen me go into the attic. She wanted me to find it. But why? She didn't blink. That was the first thing I noticed. She just sat there at the table, sipping her coffee like this morning was no different than any other. The only sound in the room was the rhythmic ticking of the ugly ceramic cat clock we got as a gag gift at our wedding. She hated that clock. She used to say it gave her anxiety. But now, she stared at it like it was keeping her grounded. I stood there by the base of the attic ladder, still dirty with dust, my fingers clutching my phone in my pocket, the pictures I'd just taken burning like hot coal in my hand. She glanced at my jeans, spotted with insulation and a fresh rip in the knee I hadn't even noticed. Her smile curled slightly, just at the corner of her mouth. You found it, didn't you? She asked. No fear. No panic. No effort to lie. Just calm, amused certainty. What is it? I said, my voice drier than I expected. That depends. Which part are you asking about? The men? The folders? The burner phone? She stood now, slow and deliberate, wrapping her robe tighter around her waist. Or are you asking about why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because for the first time in this entire unraveling mess, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a cheater. I was dealing with something else entirely. Someone who'd been planning something, mapping it out, recording it. She walked past me toward the living room, not waiting for permission. It's always funny when people find things they're not ready to understand, she said over her shoulder. That bag was never hidden, Clayton. You just finally had a reason to see it. I followed her, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know what I was already certain I wouldn't understand. She picked up a thick, leather-bound notebook from under the couch cushion and tossed it on the coffee table in front of me. Here, she said, sitting down again. This'll answer some of your questions. The notebook wasn't just a diary. It was a ledger, a journal of interactions. Names, dates, behaviors, patterns. Not just men, women too. She'd been studying them, watching them, recording responses, movements, reactions. She even gave them ratings. Risk tolerance, low. Ego manipulation, high success. Financial yield, optimal. Repeat potential, March 10th. It was clinical, like I was reading the notes of a scientist conducting human experiments. Except I knew every one of those people had probably thought they were just in a normal relationship, or fling, or affair. But to her, they were test subjects. She wasn't sleeping around because she was lost or bored. She was testing something. And then I saw it, my name. Clayton, late bloomer. High dependency. Emotionally reactive. Slow to confront. Predictable under pressure. I felt the floor shift beneath me. I wasn't her husband. I was her control group. I backed away from the table, notebook still open to that page. What the hell is this? She shrugged. What does it look like? It looks like you've been using people. She smiled again. Wider this time. Correct. Why me? She tilted her head like she was genuinely puzzled by the question. Because you were loyal. You were soft. You still say bless you when strangers sneeze. I needed to see how long it would take for someone like you to break. I should have walked out. Should have called someone. But I didn't. I stood there like a fool, like a mouse trying to reason with the trap after it's already snapped shut. She stood again, walking past me slowly. At the doorway, she turned and said quietly, "It's a little late to be shocked, Clay. You were never going to leave." Not really. She walked upstairs, and I stood there, frozen. Not because I believed her, but because part of me did. I told her I was going for a walk. That's all I said. No explanation. No tone. Just the words. She didn't even look up from her phone. Just nodded slowly, like it was part of a script she'd read 1,000 times already. But it wasn't a walk. I hadn't gone on an actual walk in over a year. It was a cover, the first lie I'd told her in years. It didn't feel empowering. It felt pathetic. But I needed to breathe. Needed to get away from that house with its silent walls and monstrous attic and coffee-soaked goodbye note she'd turned into a punchline. I needed to feel like I had even one thought that belonged to me and not to whatever long-running psychological study she'd been orchestrating right under my nose. I walked 4 blocks before realizing I didn't even have a destination. My feet were moving just to prove I could still leave, even if my mind was still pacing that same attic floor. I ended up at a small gas station off Millwood and Beecher, the kind with flickering lights and sun-faded lottery posters taped to the door. I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't hungry. I just needed somewhere she didn't exist. The guy behind the counter barely looked at me as I wandered the aisles pretending to shop. But then my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Same one from the attic message. One new text. You stayed. Didn't expect that. My mouth went dry. I glanced over my shoulder like someone was watching me. For a second, I wondered if this was all part of her game. If she was the one texting me, just to see what I'd do. I typed back. Who are you? No reply. Just 3 blinking dots for almost 30 seconds. Then nothing. Gone. I bought a bottle of water just to not look suspicious, then walked out, feeling like every face passing by might be another player in whatever experiment she was running. Back home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No music. No fake humming. No clinking of ice cubes in one of her stupid, oversized glasses she insisted made wine taste fancier. Just the sound of the heater kicking on. I crept up the stairs like a burglar in my own life. Her bedroom door was ajar. Inside, she was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair with long, deliberate strokes. Not looking at me, not saying a word. On the floor beside her, the duffel bag from the attic, now empty. Everything inside it, gone. I didn't ask where she moved it. I didn't need to. She was cleaning up, erasing the breadcrumbs. You lied, she said finally, eyes meeting mine in the mirror. Her voice wasn't accusatory, it was almost pleased, like she'd been waiting for me to finally join the game. That's new for you. I didn't answer. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But all I could do was stare at my own face reflected behind hers. Pale, smaller than I remembered, like my own skin didn't fit right anymore. She turned slightly, brushing pausing mid-stroke. Why are you still here, Clay? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Is it because you think you're close to figuring it out? She asked, rising to her feet. Or because you finally realized you'll never have anything better than me, even if I'm lying to your face? She walked past me slowly, fingers grazing my chest like a whisper of an apology that would never be spoken. And again, I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. I just stood there, haunted by one simple truth I hadn't dared admit until that moment. She wasn't trying to drive me away. She was trying to see how long I'd let her stay. I used to keep a journal. Nothing poetic, nothing confessional. Just daily thoughts, small vents, memories, scattered things that didn't fit anywhere else. I started it when we got married, thinking one day we'd look back on it together, maybe laugh at how naive we were. For years, it lived untouched in my nightstand drawer, behind expired cold medicine and dead pens. I hadn't written in it since before the pandemic. That night, after she brushed past me like I was furniture, I pulled it out. I didn't even know why at first. I guess I was looking for proof that I'd existed before her mind games began. Some version of me that still had shape, still had a spine. I flipped to the last page. I remembered writing. September 19th, 2020. A short entry about us arguing over whether to paint the kitchen eggshell or sandstone. Nothing important. Nothing useful. Then I turned the page and froze. There were new entries. Dozens. Pages and pages of them. Written in my handwriting. Only I hadn't written them. The penmanship was almost perfect. The loops, the way I dotted my I's, the slight tilt to the left, but the words were wrong. They were cleaner, tighter, more emotionally detached. Like someone had studied my style and improved it. Maribel is more intelligent than I am. I'm lucky she still comes home at all. I've noticed I get more cooperative when I cry. Need to remember that. If she leaves, I don't exist. I kept flipping, my pulse hammering, my mouth completely dry. Some entries were labeled with times and dates. Others were full-blown reflections about my progress, my adaptation to the process, even my emotional softening under pressure. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh or vomit. This wasn't a journal anymore. It was a case study. I took it to the bathroom, the only room in the house with a lock that still worked, and sat on the cold tile floor, trying to count how many of the entries were forged. All of them, probably. How long had she been doing this? Weeks? Months? Then I realized something worse, something far colder. She must have been writing in it while I was asleep. I stared at myself in the mirror across from the tub. Bags under my eyes. My skin sallow. I looked like a man who hadn't just been betrayed. I looked like I'd been erased and reprogrammed. A human echo. Suddenly, I remembered the texts. The person warning me. The attic bag. The duffel. The folders. The ratings. The smile when I said I was leaving. The burner phone, now gone. It was all connected, but not in the way I thought. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't infidelity. It was something worse. It was a project. I stood up and flipped the mirror cabinet open, looking for something, anything, to make me feel real again. But tucked behind the aspirin bottle was a folded piece of paper I'd never put there. It wasn't addressed to me. It was titled, Phase 3, Containment. And beneath that, in perfect imitation of my handwriting, subject has become reactive. Prepare final trigger. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I left the journal on the bathroom counter, opened to the page labeled Final Trigger, and sat on the floor, knees pulled tight, lights on, heart stuck in a loop of disbelief and dread. By sunrise, something in me snapped. Or maybe it clicked. A weak instinct, buried under years of blind trust and quiet survival, started to whisper, get out. Not just out of the house, out of the story, but escape means understanding. And I still didn't understand. So I did something desperate. I went back into the attic. Not for the bag, That was gone. But for the label, there'd been folders with names. One in particular I remembered because it was on the first file I'd opened, written in thick black marker, Colin Marsh. It was the only one without photos. Just a scribbled note paper clipped to the inside cover that said, non-responsive/discard. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it felt like the one breadcrumb she didn't mean to leave behind. I Googled his name on my phone. Colin Marsh. Charleston area. Nothing came up at first, just a LinkedIn profile for a plumber and some old running event photos. But when I added the keyword hospital, something finally hit. A local article. For years ago, local software engineer hospitalized after psychological breakdown, suspected self-harm. There was no photo, but the age matched. The neighborhood listed in the piece was only 5 miles from ours. I checked property records. He still lived there. Or at least, someone still did. I didn't tell Maribel I was leaving. This time, I took nothing with me. No keys, no wallet. Just my phone, a hoodie, and the hope that I wouldn't come back a worse version of myself. Colin's house was a narrow, gray 2-story with dying shrubs and blinds that hadn't been opened in years. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I heard the lock click from inside, followed by a voice, hoarse and cautious. "Who are you?" "Clayton," I said. I think we both knew the same woman. A pause. Then the door creaked open a few inches. Enough for me to see his face, gaunt, pale, eyes that looked like they hadn't fully closed in a decade. His hand trembled slightly as he held the door. "You said her name," he murmured. "No," I replied. "I didn't." He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't need to. He simply opened the door wider and walked back inside, leaving it open behind him. I followed. The interior was bare. Furniture pushed to the sides of the room like it had been arranged in haste, or not at all. Blackout curtains. A whiteboard covered in symbols and dates. On the coffee table, a single item sat perfectly centered, a spiral notebook filled with messy handwriting. "I thought I was the only one," he said, not turning to face me. "I thought I was the last." "What did she do to you?" I asked. He turned, slow and deliberate, and for the first time, I saw the scar on his temple. A clean, sharp line that disappeared into his hairline. "She taught me how to forget myself," he whispered. "And then she punished me for remembering." He reached for the notebook and handed it to me. The first page said, Phase I, infatuation. Phase 2, resistance. Phase 3, collapse. Phase 4, release. "What's Phase 4? I asked, almost afraid to say it aloud. Colin stared at me for a long time, then simply said, "You." Colin didn't sleep anymore. He didn't say it, but I could tell. His apartment was the home of someone who had stopped pretending time moved forward. There were no clocks, no food in the fridge, only walls covered in thumbtacked notes, half-erased equations, printed emails, and blurry photographs. All of them with one common denominator, her. He wasn't a lunatic. He was a survivor, just like I was trying to be. We sat in silence for nearly an hour before either of us spoke again. I was flipping through the notebook he gave me, tracing the way Maribel had patterned her process. It was clinical, calculated, horrifying. She didn't just manipulate men, she documented them. Their responses, their vulnerabilities, their behaviors under specific stressors. She treated emotions like variables. Each relationship wasn't a connection, it was a test, a case file. "I thought she loved me," I finally said, almost laughing at how childish it sounded. "She did," Colin answered flatly. "Just not the way we understand love." I looked at him. "Then how?" He didn't blink. Like a scientist loves a successful experiment. That hit harder than I expected. I stood and walked toward one of the wall collages, strings pinned between overlapping documents. Photos of Maribel, screenshots of her texts, receipts, maps. There was one photo that stopped me cold. A driver's license. Not hers. Another name, another photo. But it was her face. Younger, different haircut, same eyes. "You knew her before she was Maribel?" I asked. "She's had at least 6 names that I've confirmed," Colin replied. "Each one lasts around 3 to 4 years. Then she disappears, reinvents, starts again." My blood ran cold. "So this isn't just some twisted game? She's done this over and over?" He nodded. "Each man thinks he's special, that he broke her, saved her, or lost her. But none of us were ever the point. We were the scaffolding. She's been building something bigger." I turned back toward him, stomach tightening. What is she building? He stood slowly, crossed to a drawer, and pulled out a worn folder, handing it to me with trembling fingers. Inside were printouts from a private forum. Password protected. Archived logs from an old message board where anonymous users shared psychological conditioning methods, emotional testing strategies, scripts designed to control memory and perception in partners. It wasn't illegal, not technically, but it was deeply unethical. A dark corner of the internet where morality had been buried beneath control experiments. Maribel was a frequent poster. Under a pseudonym I won't write here. And the worst part? Many of her posts were about me. There were threads titled Phase 2 Subject Losing Focus, Recalibration Suggestions, and even one marked Clayton, Progress Plateaued, considering external stimulus. I wasn't just her husband. I was her live-in proof of concept, her test dummy for real-world applications of psychological manipulation, and she was broadcasting my collapse to an audience. But one post chilled me more than the others. It was dated just 3 weeks ago. Subject nearing Phase 4. Plan to introduce final stimulus within 30 days. May require relocation after closure. Data set almost complete. One more clean cycle needed. User, hexadecipher. Tag, controlled breakdown. Subject, Clayton H. My legs gave out. I sank to the couch, notebook slipping from my hands. My whole marriage, my life, had been something she planned to present. Not even privately. She was publishing this. Comparing notes. Perfecting it. Colin sat beside me and said something I'll never forget. You're not her victim anymore, Clay. You're her masterpiece. And in that moment, I realized something worse than betrayal. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was afraid of what she'd do once the experiment ended. Because if I was the final phase, what came after me? I didn't go home that night. I didn't text her. Didn't call. I didn't rage or confront or burn the house down. I did something she never expected me to do. I stopped participating. For the first time in years, I didn't react the way she predicted. I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't fall apart. I just disappeared from her algorithm. Colin offered his couch. I didn't sleep much, but I watched the sun rise from his window, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like the world was pressing its weight down on my lungs. It was just light. Quiet, ordinary light. That morning, I made one decision. I wasn't going to fight her game. I wasn't going to beat her at her own system. I was going to walk away from the whole equation. Back at the house, she was waiting. Sitting on the edge of the kitchen counter, legs swinging like a kid at a bus stop, sipping her morning coffee. You took your time, she said. I said nothing. Just walked to the hallway closet, grabbed the last duffel bag I hadn't touched, packed 3 shirts, a pair of jeans, my passport, and a half-used notebook that was still mine. She watched me the whole time. Running? She asked, tilting her head with that same irritating curiosity she always used when testing my limits. No, I said. Just finally remembering who I was before you started taking notes. She scoffed, but this time I saw something in her eyes. Panic, brief and small, like a glitch in her program. I walked past her, pausing only once at the doorway. You were wrong, I said calmly. You never broke me. You just buried me. Then I left. For real. No dramatic music. No explosion. Just the sound of my own footsteps hitting the pavement as I walked toward the cab I'd called 3 blocks away, because I didn't even want her to hear me leave. The next few weeks were strange. I stayed in a cheap Airbnb near Asheville, took freelance work for the first time in years, and reread old journals from before I met her. I even got coffee with an old friend I hadn't talked to since our wedding. He didn't ask why I looked thinner. He just said it was good to see me smile without effort. I filed a quiet report. Nothing public, nothing messy. I gave Colin the resources to relocate. I deleted the texts, shut down the accounts, and stopped obsessing over what she was doing. Because it didn't matter anymore. She thrived in chaos, in attention, in watching people spiral around her gravity. But I had finally stepped out of orbit. And on the day the divorce papers came in the mail, clean, signed, and strangely peaceful, I sat on a bench in the sun, opened my notebook, and wrote one single sentence. I am not the experiment. I'm the escape.